Kit Dyer is a WASH advisor with Norwegian Church Aid based in Norway. Before joining the NCA, Kit worked for UNICEF for about 10 years between 2006 and 2015 in a variety of regional and country level humanitarian WASH posts. Kit is the WASH chapter coordinator and will be talking to us about what have been the key issues in the revision for the WASH chapter and how she's been approaching the combination of input of expert consultation with other inputs such as independent studies or evaluations. Over to you, Kit.
So thank you. I just wanted to say that I am not the only WASH chapter coordinator. I have a colleague from Oxfam, Jenny Lamb, who's working with me on this. What I wanted to show today was just 3 slides. One, to show you what the new structure looks like, a little bit about where we've been led to create new standards and perhaps rejig the existing standards. I wanted to go a little bit more detail on the 2 new standards and then answer a couple of the questions that we've been asked to answer. So first of all, we were instructed, or we were given instructions, I should say, at the start of the process to try and keep the chapter as slim as possible. We have to admit we kind of ignored that a little bit in that we've now created 2 new, what we would call subdomains. So the structure will look familiar to those of us who are familiar with the old structure, in that we have subdomains looking at water supply, hygiene, excreta management, drainage, vector control, and solid waste management. But there's some new things. One of the new things is a new initial standard looking at WASH as a coherent package, meaning that the things we've learnt in the last couple of decades, both in development and humanitarian work, is that if you only concentrate on one element of WASH, you won't get the impacts you're looking for, particularly the health impacts. The other 2 new subdomains at the other end have in response to the things that we've been involved in the last couple of years, notably the Ebola response, but also other health outbreak kind of responses. And also, I guess you would call a food insecurity, famine, protracted crisis kind of response where WASH has a role to support the nutrition sector. I would just say that these 2 new subdomains are not looking at WASH in nutrition per se or WASH in health per se, but WASH as a support function to a nutrition response and WASH as a support function to a health outbreak. So the things that we've seen in the last few years in particular have helped us to develop those 2 new subdomains. The other big change that you'll see once you get into the detail of the new standard, or the proposed new standard, is we've taken on board a lot of the work that's been done quite recently looking at risk assessment and risk management. Many of us in the sector are familiar with the water safety planning concept, and we've tried to apply something similar to the way that the water supply subdomain is structured. And you could see the same kind of thinking applies to the other subdomains as well, particularly excreta management and solid waste management, where we look at the whole chain of the subdomain, if you like, from input through to final treatment and disposal. The second piece I wanted to look at is, so these 2 new subdomains and as a result 3 new standards. As I said, the reason we've included them is because we've seen in these quite specific responses a role for WASH. It's not necessarily the lead role. We would certainly say in a health outbreak, for example, Ebola, WASH has a significant role to play, but we're not a lead, if you like. We're there to make sure that we support what happens in the other sectors. So one of the key reasons why we're looking to do that is because we're quite sure that WASH has a potential to undermine the other outcomes and impacts. If we focus on WASH on its own, we may be missing or damaging the health impact, for example, or a nutrition impact. We also know there's a lot of programming intersections, particularly around the community mobilization aspects of WASH, nutrition and health. So we're trying to find ways to work on with that synergy, if you like. And also we decided that a standard for WASH in a nutrition response is required because it's an underlying determinant of poor nutrition outcomes. We know that from development. We see the same in humanitarian as well. So to cut to the chase on the questions that we were asked, we know for a fact that when we look at the WASH chapter, and I know this will be a question we talk about in a little bit more detail later, that there are gaps in our evidence base for our indicators and targets, depending on how we decide to define evidence, I guess. What we've tried to do is to broaden our scope in how we try and find that evidence, and I will talk to that a little bit later, I think, in part of our discussion. A key issue for us was a bit of a, not a tension, but somehow trying to keep in mind that at the same time as trying to contextualize the indicators and targets, they have to be universally applicable. That was one of the instructions that we were given and we agreed to. We recognized that we're now working in a much broader set of contexts, and that for Sphere to be a useful tool, it needs to be applicable in those different contexts. I like to use the example that it's got to be as applicable in Central African Republic as it would be in Ukraine, with two very different contexts. So how do we structure our indicators and targets or minimum requirements at the same time as trying, in that universality sphere, I guess, at the same time trying to get people to contextualize it. This is something we've struggled with, and as a result we've tried to pull from our peer review group. We did get quite good feedback also from the consultation process, and I'll touch on a little bit of some of the evidence that was presented to us a little bit further on. But also in our review group, we tried to go as broad as possible to find people who've worked in all these different types of contexts and to see how we could try and suit both those needs of contextualization and universality. We will be running a couple more webinars next week. This is a bit of a plug for WASH. We'll be running a couple more webinars next week, and we're hoping to focus for one of those webinars very much on evidence. Evidence at an academic level, but also evidence, I guess, at a practitioner level. That's the big picture from us from WASH. If you've got some questions, please hold on to them. There will definitely be opportunities later on. Thank you very much, and I hand it back to ALNAP.
Great, thank you so much, Kit. Just a really quick follow-up question to support your plug. If people are interested in participating in that webinar series next week, or particularly the one around evidence, how can they best get involved?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that before I opened my mouth, I guess. We will be working with Sphere perhaps to advertise it on their at the Sphere website. I think that might be the easiest way to do it, but I think at the moment we're looking at Wednesday, Thursday next week. I forget which one, and we're also trying to cover the whole world by having one in the morning and one in the afternoon.
Oh, great. So you've solved the problem that we always have with this one, where it's, can we pick people at their maximal sleepiness time, people in the evening, people in the early morning. So great. Fantastic. So people can check out the Sphere website, which has been provided to them already in the chat box, I think, for follow-up.